My life once seemed like a fairy tale, the kind every woman dreams of. Charles was the perfect husband, attentive, affectionate, and devoted. Our marriage was admired by everyone in town. I was proud to have built such a beautiful family by his side. But fate is ironic, isn't it? A new coworker of his, Lauren, began appearing at our family gatherings. At first, I paid it no mind. Now, I laugh at my own naivety. Small details started to shift in his behavior. My intuition screamed that something was wrong, but I tried to ignore it. How foolish I was. On a quiet, ordinary night, my world crumbled. Checking Charles's phone was meant to be a trivial act, yet it turned into the moment that would shatter our seemingly perfect life. The coded messages with Lauren were like invisible knives slicing through my dignity. An anonymous tip confirmed the unthinkable, a secret rendezvous between them. My heart, once full of love, now overflowed with a bitter liquid called betrayal. Every word in those messages struck like a blow, every emoji a cruel taunt. Naivety gave way to anger, tears to determination. I would no longer be a victim. I would become the architect of my own reconstruction. The initial pain exploded within me like a silent bomb. At first, trembling tears streamed down my face as I struggled to believe what I had uncovered. Like an actress in a cruel drama, I found myself playing the role of a betrayed wife, unable to understand how I had come to this point. My mind whirled with contradictory thoughts. Could it really be? I murmured to myself, replaying every moment of intimacy with Charles. The messages on his phone were irrefutable proof, yet my heart still tried to deny it. How many times had we invented stories to protect our fragile egos? I decided I needed to investigate. I would not be a passive victim, silently accepting everything as my grandmothers once did. My generation learned to fight back. I began discreetly tracking Charles's movements, jotting down times, and observing his blatant lies. Every detail was a piece in the puzzle of betrayal. Anger gradually replaced my sorrow. Ironically, that pain was making me stronger by the second. I laughed to myself, thinking, he thought he would destroy me, but instead, he's building me up. The tears dried, giving way to a cold, surgical determination. My friends tried to comfort me, but I no longer needed consolations. I wanted proof, raw, unvarnished truths. Charles thought he could manipulate me with his empty excuses, but he was mistaken. Every step I took was calculated, every move a sentence against his hypocrisy. The betrayal would not define me. It was just one chapter, not my entire story. I would turn that pain into fuel for my reconstruction. Charles and Lauren might think they would destroy me, but they were instead creating a version of me far stronger and bolder than before. My investigation was meticulous, not out of vengeance, but for self-preservation. I needed to understand every detail to heal my own wounds. No more tears would be shed for someone who didn't deserve even a single glance from me. The world would soon learn that a woman is not defined by a man's betrayal. I would be my own story, my own salvation. Charles had unwittingly unleashed a hurricane that even he would not be able to contain. The secret investigation took shape with the precision of a professional detective. I began mapping every move Charles made, turning our apartment into an intelligence center. Spreadsheets, notes, work schedules, everything became potential evidence. The hours once devoted to love were now spent unraveling his web of lies. My isolation grew silently. Friends and family looked at me with a mix of concern and pity, but I did not want sympathy. I wanted the truth. Every phone call from Charles, every message, every sudden outing was scrutinized with a surgical rigor I never thought I possessed. The solitude embraced me, but no longer as a victim. It was a strategic isolation, the calm before my great turnaround. I realized that my pain could be transformed into power. Charles thought he knew me completely, but he was about to discover a version of me even I had yet to meet. My investigations revealed layers of lies so elaborate they bordered on the absurd. How did he manage to keep so many parallel stories straight? Hypocrisy had a name, an address, and a face that was far too well put together. Lauren, his accomplice in this farce, was as deeply involved as he in constructing this pathetic theater. Began documenting every detail, not out of revenge, but for self-preservation. I needed to understand how we had arrived here, where the signs of disrespect were subtly planted and then ignored. My investigation was more than a search for evidence. It was an emotional archaeology, unearthing buried truths. The days transformed into a silent war. Outwardly, I maintained an appearance of normalcy. Internally, I was a strategist preparing my final attack. Charles had no idea of the storm that was about to break upon his perfect life. With every discovery, my determination grew. I would no longer be that submissive woman, waiting for mere crumbs of love and respect. I would be the architect of my own reconstruction. The betrayal, which should have destroyed me, was instead transforming me into someone incomparably stronger. My heart, once shattered, now beat with renewed energy. The pain turned into fuel, the tears into strategy. Charles and Lauren thought they would destroy me, but in reality, they were laying the groundwork for my most powerful rebirth. The investigation continued, and I was finally in control. I decided I could no longer delay the inevitable. The time to confront Charles had come. Our dinner was set to resemble a tragic play, with dialogues laden with tension and feigned politeness. I chose a neutral restaurant, far from our friends and family. I wanted privacy to dismantle, piece by piece, the theater of lies we had built. Charles arrived punctually, his rehearsed smile barely hiding his nervousness. "We need to talk," I said in the most controlled voice I could muster. My tone was icy, calculated. Every word would be a precise stab into the bubble of hypocrisy that enveloped us. He attempted to start with small talk about work, as if nothing had happened. I interrupted. "Enough pretending, Charles. I know about you and Lauren." His face transformed. The smile froze. His eyes dropped. He was no longer the confident man I once knew. He was just a small man, caught in his own lie. "It's not what you think," he began. A classic excuse for someone caught red-handed. My inner sarcasm chuckled. How many times have women heard that phrase? I laid out the evidence. Messages, suspicious timings, secret meetings. Each piece of evidence was another layer of truth that dismantled him. Charles tried to defend himself, but his justifications sounded like childish excuses. "We were going through a rough patch," he claimed, as if betrayal were a solution to marital problems. His hypocrisy left me both furious and bored. I realized I no longer loved him. I didn't feel anger or pain. I felt a clinical clarity about who he truly was. A small man, incapable of facing his own limitations. "It's over," I said flatly. "I'm not here to forgive. I'm here to end this." Charles reached out to grab my hand. I recoiled. My body, my choice. No touch of his belonged to me anymore. The conversation ended not with theatrics, but with a direct sentence. Our story had come to an end. Not with tears, but with dignity. I left the restaurant feeling light. I was no longer the Mary of before. I had been reborn, a strong, independent woman. The betrayal would not define me. It was just a closed chapter. My life would start anew, alone yet complete. The world had crumbled, but not all at once. It was like an emotional earthquake, each tremor revealing new truths about my marriage. The revelations I uncovered were not just messages or photos. They were fragments of a life built on lies. Charles thought he was so cunning, but every detail I uncovered turned him into a pathetic character in his own farce. Lauren, his accomplice, in this betrayal, was nothing more than another instrument in his mediocre theater of infidelity. My investigations grew with surgical precision. Spreadsheets, notes, schedules, everything became evidence. The apartment that had once been our sanctuary of love transformed into my intelligence headquarters. Every move he made was mapped. Every phone call analyzed with a rigor I never imagined I possessed. The initial pain gave way to a cold, calculated anger. I didn't crave revenge. I demanded the truth. Every lie uncovered was like peeling away, a rotten layer of an onion, each layer revealing something even more repulsive. How could he maintain so many parallel stories? Hypocrisy had a name, an address, and a face meticulously adorned. I realized that my solitude was no longer that of a victim, but that of a strategist. Friends and family looked at me with pity, but I didn't want sympathy. I wanted reconstruction. Charles thought he knew me completely, but he was about to discover a version of me even I had yet to recognize. The days turned into a silent war. Outwardly, I maintained normalcy. Inwardly, a tempest was ready to break. My heart, once broken, now pulsed with renewed energy. The betrayal that was meant to destroy me was transforming me into someone incomparably stronger. I understood that I would not be defined by a man's infidelity. I would be my own story, my own salvation. Charles had awakened a hurricane that even he could not contain. Every piece of evidence, every lie, every secret meeting, Everything would be used for my reconstruction. My investigation continued meticulously, not for revenge, but for self-preservation. I needed to understand every detail to heal my own wounds. No more tears would be shed. For someone who did not deserve even a single look, I would turn that pain into fuel. With every discovery, my determination grew. No more scraps of love and respect. I would be the architect of my own reconstruction. Charles and Lauren thought they would destroy me, but they were laying the foundation for my most powerful rebirth. The investigation continued, and I, finally, was in control. My heart pounded as I decided to finally confront Charles and Lauren. It wouldn't be just a meeting, but a definitive judgment on my life. I chose a sophisticated restaurant in the city, a place where our social circle always saw us as the perfect couple. The irony of using that stage to expose our farce could not be any more cruel. I arrived ahead of them, selecting a strategic table in the corner. My appearance was calculated, elegant, serene, but with a determination of steel hidden beneath. My black dress. Every move I made was precise, every breath controlled. When I saw them enter, I felt a mix of anger and contempt. Charles tried to act casual, and Lauren wore a forced smile. Little did they know that every inch of their lies was already exposed. I greeted them with a smile that mirrored my inner state. "You have no idea what's coming next." "Glad you both came," I said, placing a folder filled with printouts of messages, photos, and proof of secret meetings on the table. Their expressions changed instantly. Charles paled, and Lauren froze. I began to speak, every word a precise dagger. "Did you really think you could fool me? That I would just be another submissive wife?" The revelations came like crushing waves, intimate details, secret encounters, compromising messages, everything laid bare without hesitation. These were not mere accusations. They were sentences. My voice did not waver, and my gaze was surgical. Charles tried to interrupt, stammering excuses. "Don't you dare!" I snapped. "Your time of manipulating me is over." Lauren, attempting to play the victim, began a feeble defense that died before it even started. The restaurant, once a haven for light conversation, transformed into the stage for my liberation. Every word I uttered was an act of empowerment. I wasn't there to forgive. I was there to declare my independence. "You thought you could destroy me," I said, pausing so that every word resonated. "But you're creating the strongest version of me." The ensuing silence was deafening. I didn't need to shout. My clarity was more impactful than any scream. I made it clear that this would be our last encounter. I didn't want debates or negotiations. My decision was final. I stood, adjusted my dress, and declared, "My life starts now." I left without looking back, each step a declaration of freedom. The betrayal would not be my end. It was merely a chapter in a much larger story. The confrontation with Charles was devastating. His tears of remorse seemed more rehearsed than sincere. When he begged for forgiveness, his words came off as a pathetic attempt at manipulation. "I'm sorry. It means nothing," I repeated to myself, feeling my dignity grow with every second. I decided that I would no longer be a prisoner of his lies. The betrayal was not my destiny. It was just one chapter that I would choose how to write. I looked into his eyes and said with a coldness I never thought I could muster, "It's over." My voice no longer trembled. Every word was an act of liberation. Charles tried to argue, to justify his secret meetings with Lauren, but his excuses fell flat. I realized that his pleas were not born of love, but of fear, the fear of losing the control he had always exerted over me. My decision to walk away wasn't dramatic, it was strategic. I would not be a defeated wife, but a woman choosing her own peace. I gathered my things with clinical calm, every object symbolizing a piece of my reconstruction. As I left, I didn't look back. My steps were firm, my gaze determined. The pain of betrayal would be transformed into the fuel for my new journey. Charles had awakened in me a strength that even he could never comprehend. Life awaited me, free from emotional chains and ready to be rewritten by my own hands. Months later, life showed me that pain can be a merciless teacher, yet also a powerful ally in personal reconstruction. The fragile, broken Mary had given way to a woman who was redesigning her own existence with the precision of an architect and the strength of a warrior. Therapy became my first safe harbor. In weekly sessions, I unraveled layers of myself hidden behind societal expectations and silent fears. I realized that Charles's betrayal wasn't about me. It was about his own limitations as a human being. Every tear I shed transformed into fuel for my transformation. Self-care stopped being a vague concept and became my utmost priority. I started practicing yoga, reading books I had once neglected, and traveling alone. Every small achievement was a declaration of independence. My body, once stiff with pain, now moved with lightness and determination. I rediscovered friendships that had been sidelined during my marriage. Incredible women welcomed me without judgment, showing me that true connection isn't defined by gender or status. They taught me that healing isn't linear, but it is possible. Work became my ally as well. I invested in professional development and sought new challenges. My career, once placed on the back burner, took on new dimensions. Every project completed was proof that my identity extended far beyond being someone's wife. My encounters with Charles now reduced to objective discussions over practical matters. No resentment, no lingering bitterness. Just the acknowledgement that people change, paths diverge, and life moves on. Maturity taught me that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing up energy to move forward. My heart, once closed off, began to open ever so slightly, not for an immediate new relationship, but for the possibility of love, a love built on respect, partnership, and mutual choice. I realized that solitude wasn't a punishment, but a temporary state of reorganization. The town that once felt too small now became a universe of possibilities. Every street corner, every cafe, every encounter tasted of freedom. I was no longer defined as a betrayed wife, but as the woman I chose to be, resilient, compassionate, and endlessly curious about my own journey. The betrayal that once seemed like my end became just a chapter, an important chapter, but not the entire book. And I was ready to write the next pages in the ink of my own courage. Charles's betrayal became my greatest lesson. I discovered that pain can be a disguised gift. Every tear shed didn't weaken me. It honed my courage. I realized that women, like me, are not defined by betrayal, but by the strength to rebuild, reinterpret, and be reborn. My story proves that self-love conquers any act of infidelity.